The movie starts, and a homeless man with a long beard is shown at the top of a hill, sitting on the benches and enjoying the view from which the whole city is visible. The homeless man is then suddenly alerted by some movement in the bushes. For his safety, he takes off his shoes and holds them in his hands, so that if anything attacks him, he can counter back. However, no movement takes place for 5-6 minutes, and the poor man just laughs as he thinks about the creature in the bushes that was about to attack him and goes to him, talking to himself, starts to mock the creature. He bends down to wear his shoes, and behind him is a guy in black clothes wearing a black mask and holding a sharp scalpel. The homeless guy doesn't realize the assassin is behind him, and the assassin stabs him in the back. The assassin keeps stabbing him brutally, and also cuts his head and scalps him violently. After butchering him, he picks up his shoes and wears them. Clementine Carter is an old physicist who has been invited on a radio podcast. She has recently solved the homicide case of Andrew Lubitz, who was a serial assassin. In Andrew Lubitz's case, Clementine experienced some visions that showed the victims, the ways of butchering, the locations, and most importantly, facial features, which she, along with her father, matched with the clues that led to her father ending Andrew Lubitz. The host of the show calls her a national hero and asks her about her physical powers. So Clementine reveals that she can only experience pain when the other person's pain is real, and she doesn't know when the next time she will experience it. She then starts to talk about how she played her role in Andrew Lubitz's case. While talking, the host starts to take some calls from the audience, so they can ask questions from her. On the other side, the assassin is sitting in his car and listening to the interview with Clementine. The eyes of the demon are locked on his next victim. An old guy, aged 50-55, is a gardener and has come to a house to provide his gardening services. After he is done with his job, he is ready to return. While arranging his stuff in the trunk of his car, the woman he worked for comes out from the terrace and says she is going to the pool for a swim. She tells him how he is always busy and should take some time for himself. He just tells her about his busy routine, and the lady then walks back inside her house to go for a swim. The assassin sees this as an opportunity to strike. He gets out of his car and starts to silently walk towards the old man. He gets right behind him, and moments later, the old man realizes that someone is behind him. As soon as the old man realizes and tries to take a turn, the monster strikes with his scalpel and stabs the old guy dozens of times in the back. He then repeats his brutal habit of cutting off the scalp and cutting the forehead. Meanwhile, the wife is chilling in the pool. She is also listening to the podcast by Clementine and is enjoying it. As she listens, she thinks of calling and asking her questions. She calls the given number to talk to Clementine. The backstage worker receives her call, where she introduces herself as Jade and shows her excitement to talk. The receiver tells her to hold, as Clementine is on another call. Therefore, Jade starts to swim again while keeping the phone on hold. But the assassin has now eyed Jade. He reaches the pool area and locks the entrance door. As soon as Jade sees the assassin, she freaks out and tries to scream at her husband for help, but it leads to no results. She starts to swim here and there in the pool to dodge the assassin, which she manages to do. She gets out and makes a run for the entrance door, but, unfortunately, that has been locked by the assassin. This is also the moment the call from Jade connects, and her screams for help can be heard clearly. The screams are heard by Clementine, and she experiences a vision. In the vision, she sees Jade being butchered by the scalper, and also sees some facial features of the scalper. The vision baffles Clementine, and she faints, to which the hosts immediately call 911 for the rescue of Jade, and also call for a doctor for Clementine. Clementine wakes up and sees two detectives in front of her. Detective Hayden and Detective Lupino are a couple. Detective Hayden first calms Clementine down, and then asks her questions about the screams and her vision, which Clementine describes in detail. She says that she saw the same types of visions in the Andrew Lubitz case, and thinks it can be him, to which both detectives act uncomfortable as Andrew is deceased, and he can't come back from the grave. Clementine is also confused and pleads with the detectives to include her in the investigation, as she can help catch the assassin. Detective Lupino isn't in favor of this, so Hayden goes away with her to talk. Meanwhile, Hayden and Lupino talk about what to do next, and the hosts offer Clementine some drinks and ask her to rethink as Andrew can't be back. Lupino has some personal issues with Clementine and suggests Hayden first suspect Clementine, as she is the one who gained popularity by solving the previous case, and she may have hired a copycat assassin to gain more. However, Hayden rejects this opinion, as he thinks she is taking a personal grudge. Hayden calls Clementine and asks her to go with them to the crime scene as well. On their way, They discuss the details of the previous homicide case. Hayden and Lupino suggest that this is a copycat assassin who is trying to gain popularity. They soon reach the crime area, and the moment Clementine steps down, her visions start again. She starts to experience the exact location where the assassin parked his car, and also marks the footsteps of the assassin. From the moment he reached the gardener, to when he went inside the home to end Jade, Clementine also finds out that the assassin took the gardener's hat after ending him, and wore it while brutalizing Jade. She reaches the pool area, and the visions start again. She sees the deceased body of Jade, whose face has been brutally peeled off, and the assassin is using her face skin as a mask. She asks Jade who butchered her, and what the facial features of the assassin are. But the soul is unable to answer this and warns Clementine to be careful, as she can be next. The intensity of this vision leads to Clementine falling in the pool, but the moment she is about to fall, Hayden saves her. She tells Hayden the details and says she wants to leave. She books a cab and leaves. As soon as the cab leaves the crime location, another car also starts to follow the cab. The assassin is in the other car and is wearing a mask made from Jade's skin. Clementine reaches her home, and the assassin takes a look at her house and drives away. Clementine, upon reaching home, sets up a ritual and starts to perform it. In this ritual, she places some holy things and starts to call Doug, who was a guy whom Clementine loved and was a paranormal expert. Doug had one day, shockingly, committed, which left Clementine traumatized. She performs the ritual, and the soul of Doug arrives behind her and grabs her. Suddenly, a shot from a gun is fired. It is shot by Clementine's father, who claims he saw a man behind her. He then asks what Clementine is doing, to which she answers that she was calling Doug, which angers his father. According to him, Doug was weak, which is why he committed suicide too. However, Clementine breaks down and informs her father about Jade's homicide. Her father also gets shocked, but calms her down by making her coffee. His father tells Clementine that she doesn't need to worry as he shot Andrew in the face, and he can't be alive in any situation. He also suggests that this may be a copycat, to which she agrees and goes to sleep. The next day, Detective Hayden receives a call from Clementine, and she tells him that the wrong shoes may be a hint, to which Hayden replies that a man was found deceased in the hills, and his shoes had been taken off. Clementine requests that Hayden take her to the deceased body, to which Hayden forcefully agrees. Hayden and Lupino had a plan to go to the beach and relax, but because of Clementine, he has to go with her. He promises his wife that he will return early, and they will go to the beach. On the other side, as soon as Clementine leaves her house, the assassin comes out of a car parked in front of her house and slowly opens the door and enters it. Clementine and Hayden reach the mortuary. The doctor says that the old man had charges of thief and selling. He was on bail before his demise. He being assassinated may be a win-win situation. While seeing the body, the visions of Clementine start to come again, and she sees the body of an old man standing up. The old man tells her how heinous the assassin was and how he ended him. And now the assassin is hungry for Clementine's blood. He also tells how one of his old friends passed away. Clementine asks the old man if he saw the face, to which he replies that he didn't, as the scalper was wearing a black mask. The vision ends, and Clementine is calmed down by Hayden and the doctor. Back at the house, the father is lying on the couch in the room and is watching TV peacefully when the soul of Doug appears next to him and pleads with the father that someone has entered the house who will harm him, so he should be ready for defense. Doug keeps pleading, and suddenly, the scalper enters the room. The father takes out his gun to shoot, but before he can pull the trigger, the demon jumps and stabs him. The vision of Doug stays and keeps requesting that father counterattack and pull the trigger. The father falls to the ground, and the scalper grips his stitches. However, the hosts of the radio program arrive at Clementine's house. They had called Clementine 10 times before coming, but she didn't answer because she was gone. They want to know if Clementine was free so that they can get her full and completed interview. They ring the bell, but it leads to nothing. Then, when one of them tries to knock on the door opens on its own, as it was left open by the assassin. Doug's spirit appears again, pleading with them to save the father, but neither of them can hear him. They are both confused about whether to enter or not, but all of a sudden, they hear a strange, struggling sound, and they rush upstairs to see that the father is lying on the ground and is covered in blood. They both immediately call 911 and the police. The assassin runs away from the terrace connected to the room when he hears the footsteps coming upstairs. Meanwhile, Clementine is taken to the police station for further investigation of the case. They examine the family history of Andrew Lubitz. Andrew's mother was an adult worker, and his father had fled away. Andrew also had a brother whose name was Anton. Anton was last questioned months ago, and Clementine wants that he be taken into police custody and questioned. Hayden replies that this isn't possible due to regulations. While arguing, Hayden receives a call from one of his police mates who tells him about the attack. When Hayden informs Clementine about this, she starts to blame herself, saying that she shouldn't have left her father alone, and she rushes to the hospital. She reaches the hospital and fortunately finds her father in a stable condition. She sits beside her father, starts to cry, and apologizes, saying that she shouldn't have left him alone. She calls Doug again, who tells her that her father will be saved. She then asks the podcasters, who tell her that they didn't see the assassin. She then demands a security guard in front of her father's ward, to which Lupino first hesitates, but then agrees on Hayden's insistence. Lupino gives advice to keep an eye on her, to which Hayden replies that one of his men, Detective Nelson, is already keeping an eye on her. Sometime later, Clementine notices a movement behind her, and she quickly sprays bear spray on them, only to find out that it is the producer and the host of the radio podcast who wanted an interview with her. Clementine thanks them for saving her father's life, and then also apologizes for the spray. She agrees to the interview and leaves. Officer Nelson, who is keeping an eye on her, is also in the parking lot, resting in his car. When Clementine leaves, he also leaves to chase her. Clementine drives long and reaches a house. She rings the bell, but there is no answer. But when she knocks on the door opens, which means that the door wasn't locked. She enters the house and feels something strange. Suddenly, a vision comes to her, and she sees the deceased body of an old man. This old man is the father of Detective Lupino, who was butchered while solving the case of Andrew Lubitz. He tells Clementine that he should have listened to her, and if he had, he would have been alive today. Clementine asks him about the assassin, and he points out the room next to him. She enters the room and sees the deceased body of one of her friends, who had been a victim of the scalper. The woman tells her the story of her homicide and screams, which disorients Clementine, and her vision ends when she sees an old guy in front of her. That old guy screams and shouts what Clementine is doing in his house. Clementine also freaks out, and the old man starts to choke her. Officer Nelson interrupts, takes down the old man, and saves Clementine. Detectives Hayden and Lupino arrive at the scene. They ask Clementine why she came to this address, and she explains that it is linked to the Andrew Lubitz case. The detectives start investigating the house and discover a room in the basement. Inside, they find a photo of Andrew's mother, peeled skin, and belongings from the scalper's victims. Detective Hayden says the case is solved, and he arrests the old guy. He also tells Clementine to come to the police station, which she rejects as she has to go to the church and attend the funeral of Jade. The old guy is taken into custody, and Hayden shows him different photos and asks him to confess his crime. But the old man is hesitant. He says he didn't do any of the butchering, and he just bought this house as he wants to sell it further. He says that he was on a plane when the assassinations of Jade and the homeless guy took place. He asks for a lawyer, and both the detectives leave the room after taking his fingerprint. Clementine reaches home and goes to sleep. In her dream, she sees her lover, Doug, and they both are in the afterlife. Doug tells her that she should find her father as soon as possible so that he doesn't pass away, and she should hurry as her father doesn't have a long time to stay. They both start to search for her father, and they find him in a car with Clementine's mother. Clementine goes to his father's car and asks him to come out, but his father can't hear her, which means that the case hasn't been solved yet. The phone rings, and Clementine wakes up. She answers it. It is from Director Corman from the church. He tells Clementine that there has been a slight issue at Jade's funeral, and it can be solved quickly if she can come down to the church. Clementine agrees, but the call is made forcefully by the assassin. The scalper has kept his knife on the back of Corman's neck, and he instructs Corman to call Clementine to the church. As soon as the call is over, the assassin pushes his knife and ends Dr. Corman by stabbing him. Corman screams, to which the father of the church enters the room, and the demon ends him too by stabbing him. At the police station, Hayden and Lupino are having a chat when the reports come. The reports prove that the shed was that of the victims, but the gloves used for butchering don't match the fingerprints of the old guy. They match Bob Tarkovsky's fingerprints, whose wife, Jenny Tarkovsky, was butchered by Andrew Lubitz. This means that the assassin is Bob, and they both rush to the church to inform Clementine. Clementine has reached the church and is starting to search for Dr. Corman. She reaches the office and sees the deceased body of Corman, which freaks her out, and the scalper attacks her from behind. Hayden and Lupino have also reached the church, and upon hearing the screams of Clementine, they both take out their guns. Clementine fights with a scalper, but reaches the moment when she stands by the wall and the scalper is in front of her, ready to stab her. The moment he raises his hand, Clementine says he will reveal his identity before brutalizing her. He is about to take off the mask, but is shot by Detective Lupino. Lupino asks Clementine if she is fine, but Clementine sees Lupino's father behind her, who asks Clementine to tell Lupino that he is proud of her. Before Clementine could have said anything, the scalper stands up and chops Lupino's head off. He reveals his identity. He is Bob, who started the brutalities in memory of his wife, and he blames Clementine for not informing everyone about Andrew before time. Clementine calls the spirit of Jenny, which tells Bob that it isn't Clementine's fault. She asks Bob to join her, to which Bob reacts by shooting himself in the head. Clementine breaks down emotionally. A few days later, Clementine is at the hospital with her father, and it is revealed that the father can see and hear Clementine in the afterlife, which means that the case has been solved. The father comes out of the afterlife. He wakes up in the hospital and hugs Clementine, indicating that bad times are over.